questions from the Russians about talks that their people had directly with the Clinton campaign advisors this time, and healthcare whiplash as the bean counters tell us who wins and who loses. Newt Gingrich with his take on that in moments. Both of those stories and this shocker from the White House that went a bit under the radar today. Watch.
Today, we're beginning the process of a long overdue reorganization of our federal departments and agencies. We have assembled one of the greatest cabinets in history, and I believe that so strongly. And we want to empower them to make their agencies as lean and effective as possible, and they know how to do it.
He is talking about doing something that never happens in Washington, folks. He's telling the people around that table, his cabinet, to cut their agencies, in some cases by 20%. So in one day, we are talking about rolling back the biggest entitlement of our time, Obamacare, and cutting the size of government. This is important because this is never done in Washington. Republicans don't do this, and Democrats definitely don't do this. So welcome to the first 100 days, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum. It is day 53.
There's duplication and redundancy everywhere. Billions and billions of dollars are being wasted on activities that are not delivering results for hardworking American taxpayers. This order requires a thorough examination of every executive department and agency to see where money is being wasted, how services can be improved, and whether programs are truly serving American citizens.
Imagine that. Joining me now to talk about all this, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Newt, good evening. Good to have you here.
It's good to be with you.
So listen to President Trump in that.
By the way, that was really I was saying, what you just pointed out was really important, and you hit it right on the mark. This is potentially a really big move to gain control over the bureaucracies, to shrink the government, to eliminate waste, and to empower the president's appointees to really go out there very aggressively and do the kind of entrepreneurial job that Donald Trump believes in, not to waste any money and to run a streamlined, efficient organization. If they can keep driving at that, that's going to be a very major change in Washington.
And this is an executive order today that got almost no attention, but certainly made me sit up and prick up my ears when I was listening to this in my office, because I thought, wow, I mean, I don't really think if any of the other people on the Republican side running had won, we would necessarily be having this conversation. Now, of course, the proof is going to be in the pudding, as you well know. Whether or not he can pull this off is a whole other thing, because nobody shrinks the size of these agencies and nobody rolls back entitlements. So will he be able to pull this off?
Well, and you look at, for example, cutting back some of the costs for the brand new Air Force One, cutting back some of the costs for buying the F-35 fighter plane. Every time you turn around, Trump is doing something. This is what people don't get in the city yet. It's not about right or left. He's an entrepreneur. He gets up every morning and he tries to figure out 5 or 6 or 8 things he can do that are real, that change things, that move us in the right direction. And his instinct as a businessman, the reason he ended up being worth so much money, is he's very frugal. He came in, under budget, ahead of schedule. If you go look at the new Trump Hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue where the post office was, they did a wonderful job. Ivanka was in charge. They did a great job, but they came in under budget and ahead of schedule, and he's going to try to bring that attitude to the entire U.S. government.
Well, there's a lot of business people around that table, and he was criticized for putting so many business people in the cabinet. But they understand that kind of cost cutting and the kind of decisions that CEOs have to make every day. So we'll see if it gets anywhere. But Mr. Speaker, stay with us, because I do want to get your reaction to another very big story tonight. A spokesperson for the Kremlin says that Russian officials did not just meet with members of President Trump's campaign. They also met with members of the Clinton camp. Doug McKelway lays this out for us tonight from the State Department. Hi, Doug.
Hi, Martha. These Saturday comments from Vladimir Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, basically confirm what many defenders of Attorney General Jeff Sessions have said all along, and what Sessions himself has said, that it is not unusual for a sitting senator or a high-level campaign advisor to have a meeting with an ambassador, even if it's the ambassador from the Soviet Union or from Russia. Putin's spokesman was stating what many would regard as simply obvious.
If you look at some people connected with Hillary Clinton, during her campaign, you would probably see that he had lots of meetings of that kind. There are lots of specialists in politology, people working in think tanks, advising Hillary or advising people working for Hillary.
And we reached out to former Clinton campaign spokesman Nick Merrill about those comments, who told us, quote, "It's not true," which is why they're using the word probably, is my guess. Others point out it was not the meeting that Sessions had with the Russian ambassador, but his poorly constructed response to a question during his confirmation hearing from Minnesota Senator Al Franken. Here it is.
And if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
In the flurry of criticism that came after that remark, it came to light that many Democrats had also met with Kislyak. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi denied having met with the ambassador, but Politico found a 2010 photo showing her with him. Same with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Senator Claire McCaskill also tweeted that despite having been on the Senate Armed Services Committee for 10 years, she had never met with Kislyak. She had apparently forgotten the 2013 tweet of hers which read, quote, "off to meeting with Russian ambassador." Indeed, in the midst of all this Sessions controversy, Ambassador Kislyak was photographed at the speech that President Trump gave to a joint session of Congress, surrounded by Democrats. Martha, back to you.
Thank you, Doug. So back with more former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. What do you make of all that?
You know, this is the sort of stuff that leads the average American to be sick of politics. The Democrats clearly in this whole case are just lying. They know that it's routine for a U.S. senator to meet. The truth is the only person I know of who was getting direct money from a Russian company that came anywhere close to a campaign was John Podesta's brother, who was paid, I think, over $100,000 by a Russian bank to lobby for them in Washington. This whole thing is infuriating because you take a guy like Jeff Sessions, who's a very honorable, very hardworking man. You listen precisely to the question being asked, which clearly is campaign-related, and he gave a campaign-related answer. I think had he been asked, have you ever met a Russian ambassador, he'd have said, sure. I'm a U.S. senator. Of course I have. This whole thing, it is infuriating. And by the way, Secretary Clinton, it would be interesting to go back and find out how many times did she have dinner with the Russian foreign minister? How many times did she have meetings with the Russian foreign minister? How many times did she meet with the Russian ambassador?
Both Hillary Clinton and then candidate Trump both said they wanted to start over with Russia, that they thought there might be some areas where they could compromise, where they could discuss. So I don't think it's all that shocking that either side would have had some sort of outreach to try to see whether or not that might work. Before I let you go in the last minute that I have, Newt, I want to get your thoughts on the scoring by the CBO of this GOP health care bill. Do you like it or not?
They should abolish the Congressional Budget Office. It is corrupt. It is dishonest. It was totally wrong on Obamacare by huge, huge margins. I don't trust a single word they have published, and I don't believe them.
But the head of it is a Trump appointee, and in many ways, I think people maybe misjudge what they're supposed to do. I mean, their job is to figure out whether or not this is something that could get through on reconciliation, right?
They lie.
Not to make a judgment about the whole bill.
Let me be very clear. No, let me be very clear. Okay, I helped balance the budget 4 straight times, the only time in your lifetime. We fought the Congressional Budget Office every time. When Obamacare came out, they used the architect of Obamacare as their advisor on how to score Obamacare, and their scoring, you go back and look at it, it is a totally dishonest, disgustingly wrong, and it is that whole thing should be abolished. They should replace it by putting out to bid and having 3 to 5 professional firms score these things. Nobody has an exact score. It's not possible. And even tonight, Dr. Tom Price, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, pointed out there are whole sections of this bill they didn't score. So I really do think it's disgusting, and I'm really disappointed that the Republicans have not abolished the Congressional Budget Office because it is so profoundly dishonest.
All right. More to come on that. Newt Gingrich, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
So breaking just moments ago, the Justice Department has now responded to congressional demands for any and all information on President Trump's allegations that former President Obama was spying on him during the campaign. Judge Napolitano with his take on what they said, plus two exclusives for you tonight. First, Sandra Duran was killed by a drunk driver who had been previously deported 5 times from this country. Her fiancé joins us as he decides to speak out tonight. Also, a new documentary about the hours leading up to Michael Brown's death in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014 has created a firestorm. The filmmaker behind that film joins us before the prosecuting attorney, Bob McCullough, reacts.
I couldn't believe what I had read. Michael was in the store the night before he died. And St. Louis County saw the videotape, and they didn't tell us. Well, guess what, St. Louis County? I've got the videotape.
Place Obamacare.
Tell Congressman Jordan to vote with President Trump.
So breaking tonight just moments ago, the Justice Department responding to demands for the DOJ to come forward with any and all information on President Trump's allegation that then President Obama was spying or wiretapping him during the 2016 campaign. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live in Washington on what the DOJ is saying about this on this evening of this deadline. Hi, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Martha. Within the last hour, a Justice Department spokesman confirming to Fox News that they have asked the committee for more time to review the request and determine if documents exist. Meantime, the White House spokesman telling reporters today the president's tweet March 4th was not meant literally.
The president was very clear in his tweet that it was, wiretapping. That spans a whole host of surveillance types of options. The House and the Senate intelligence committees will now look into that and provide a report back.
The House Intelligence Committee deadline comes just 1 week before the first public hearing on the Russia investigation, where current and former administration officials, including FBI Director James Comey, are invited witnesses. The committee's ranking Democrat believes the FBI director may be eager to testify.
The press reports are accurate that he asked the Department of Justice to knock this down, and they refused for whatever reason. He may welcome the opportunity, but he'll certainly have that on March 20th.
And moments ago, we received this statement from a spokesman for the committee's Republican chairman, who wants relevant documents before the public hearing a week today. It reads in part, quote, if the committee does not receive a response by then, the committee will ask for this information during the March 20th hearing and may resort to a compulsory process if our questions continue to go unanswered. And we're told tonight that specifically means issuing subpoena for any records, Martha.
Okay. Thanks, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Here now, Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, good to see you tonight.
Oh, good evening.
What do you make of that latest report?
I don't know that the Justice Department has what the Intelligence Committee of the House is looking for, because sources have told Fox that if then Mr. Donald Trump, the president-elect, was surveilled as he says he was, both during the campaign, Mr., and after he was elected president-elect, it was done by a foreign intelligence entity from a foreign country, an ally of ours, the British Foreign Intelligence Service, known as GCHQ, the initials for that entity. And that entity was able then to bypass the NSA, the CIA, the DNI, and the DOJ, the entities in the United States that would have jurisdiction over it.
So you're suggesting that President Obama went beyond our own intelligence agencies and through British surveillance, received transcripts of phone conversations that the Trump campaign was having?
This is what sources in the intelligence community have told Fox. Now, just to give a little background here, the NSA has 24/7, 365 access to all the computer servers and telecom server computers in the United States.
Metadata.
Correct. They can actually download into digital form the conversations and the texts. They don't have time to read all that, but they have access to it. Guess what foreign entity has access to the NSA database? This British spying entity, GCHQ. So they could have obtained this information, sources tell us, translated the raw data into actual transcripts and shared it with someone in the West Wing. It probably wouldn't have been with the president personally, because he wouldn't want anybody to be able to say that I met with a British spy in the White House, but it would have gone through someone in the White House.
But you say that he wouldn't require a FISA order. He wouldn't need that.
Correct.
As president, he could get that directly. He could just call up our intelligence agencies and saying, I'd like to see that phone conversation?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. There's a paragraph in the FISA statute which says, notwithstanding anything in this law or any other law, the President of the United States may order surveillance on any person in the United States. And
they have to be a perceived security threat, I would imagine.
Yes, but he doesn't need to persuade anyone of that other than himself. Now, according
There's
to...
no evidence that that is what happened.
Correct, because according to sources...
Just that the ability would be there for that.
The ability is absolutely there, but according to the sources with whom Fox has spoken, that is not what happened. Because for him to do that, there would be a record of his ordering the NSA to cough up these transcripts. By going through foreign entities, and the foreign entities, there probably was another foreign entity besides the GCHQ, between the White House and the GCHQ, by going through that route, then all these people whose faces were on the screen, Jim Comey, Sally Yates, who was running the DOJ at that time.
Who had the Flynn transcripts.
Correct. Jack Brennan was running the CIA. Admiral Rogers running the NSA. They could all plausibly and legally and truthfully say, we had nothing to do with it.
That's a lot. We will see. Interesting stuff. Thank you very much, Judge.
You're welcome.
Good to see you as always.
Likewise.
So still ahead, the first 100 days with an exclusive after surveillance video featured in a new documentary about the 2014 death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, has touched off a huge round of controversy. The man behind that documentary is here tonight with us. After that, we will speak with Ferguson prosecutor Bob McCullough to react. And a prominent U.S. attorney asked to resign from the DOJ, but he claims he was fired. We're going to tell you why critics call the latest act of political grandstanding in the age of Trump. When Mark Thiessen and Mo Elleithee debate. Joining us right next. We'll be right back. Some new reaction tonight to a dust-up that might have been viewed as business as usual after any other election. President Trump, like dozens of new presidents before him, requested the resignation of the U.S. attorneys appointed by the previous president. The attorney for the Southern District of New York, however, refused, instead forcing the administration to fire him. Critics now charging that this act of defiance by an Obama appointee is nothing more than political grandstanding. For more on that part of the story, we're joined now by Chief White House correspondent John Roberts, live at the White House. John.
Martha, good evening to you. We're trying to find out exactly the answer to that question. Is it standard procedure or some political grandstanding? And nobody has yet given us a full accounting of it, hard as we might have tried. But here's what happened. On Friday, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions asked for the resignation of the remaining 46 U.S. attorneys. That included a fellow named Preet Bharara, who was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Now, asking him for a letter of resignation was a little unusual because back on November the 30th, then President-elect Donald Trump asked Bharara to come to Trump Tower, where in a meeting, according to Bharara, the president asked him to stay on. Let's take you back to that day.
I said I would absolutely consider staying on. I agreed to stay on. I have already spoken to Senator Sessions, who is, as you know, the nominee to be the Attorney General. He also asked that I stay on.
So Bharara said that day he believed he was going to be the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York for some time to come. When we heard that the Attorney General asked for the resignation of all these U.S. attorneys, we thought, well, maybe it's a pro forma thing. He's going to ask Bharara for the resignation letter, but he's not going to accept it. Now, Bharara, as far as we can understand, did not submit a letter of resignation, and then on Saturday, he tweeted out that he had been fired. Adding to the intrigue in all of this, Martha, is the fact that a couple of days before Bharara was fired, President Trump called him to speak with him. I asked the press secretary, Sean Spicer, what that call was all about today. Listen here.
Can you tell us what that was all about? Did the president change his mind?
No, the president was calling to thank him for his service. This is a standard, as I said, a standard action that takes place at most administrations. Then Attorney General Reno sent out an almost identical letter in 1993. The Bush administration sent out a similar one as well. So, I mean, this is a very common practice for all political appointees.
Spicer claims it is a common practice. He mentioned Janet Reno in 1993 asking for letters of resignation from all of the U.S. attorneys. Among the U.S. attorneys who resigned that day was the former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Alabama, Jeff Sessions, who is now the Attorney General. So he's on solid ground, Spicer, when he says that this is standard operating procedure. We still don't know, Martha, exactly why Bharara was asked to stay on, and then he was asked for his resignation and later fired. Nobody is exactly saying, but both sides are digging in their heels saying this is what we're saying and nothing more at this point.
Thank you so much, John. John Roberts at the White House. So with more on this, Mark Thiessen, former chief speechwriter to President George W. Bush, and Mo Elleithee, the founding executive director of Georgetown University's Institute of Politics and Public Service. Both are Fox News contributors. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to see you both tonight.
You too.
So, Mark, it is a little bit of a strange twist on what we usually see. What do you think happened here?
Oh, I think probably what happened is they decided to get rid of all of the attorneys. Preet Bharara wasn't targeted specifically. They asked for everybody's resignation, and Trump was probably calling him to explain to him that he had changed his mind, and he wouldn't take the call. And then when he got the request to resign, he wouldn't submit his resignation. I mean, it's kind of outrageous. The fact is, as was presented in the opening segment, every president has done this. Jeff Sessions got fired when he was a U.S. attorney. So I don't know who this guy thinks he is that he can resist this. But the larger question here, Martha, is Donald Trump allowed to staff his own administration? On Capitol Hill, you've got the Democrats slow-rolling not just his cabinet nominees, but the sub-cabinet nominees, hundreds of positions to be filled to run the federal government. And now they're creating this fake news outrage about him firing Preet Bharara and these other U.S. attorneys. These people serve at the pleasure of the president. When the president's pleasure ends, so does their service.
Yeah, but this, I don't know whether he had told others in that group that they could stay and then changed his mind. I don't know, Mo, if most people in America really care whether or not, he gets to keep his position. If everybody else is going, it seems obviously it's the president's prerogative. But do you smell anything more than that here?
100% it's the president's prerogative. It is 100% common practice for this to happen, as has been noted several times. This feels a little bit different. It kind of raises three issues in my mind. One is the mass demand for resignation that asks people to clear out by the end of the day. That's not always normal. Most of the time, presidents will demand the resignation letter, but then will stagger the acceptance of those resignations until they find a replacement or to allow ongoing investigations to run their course. The fact that they were asked to leave by the end of the day was a little abnormal. Number two, as has been referenced, he did ask Preet Bharara to stay on. And so it begs the question, what changed? Why did he suddenly decide? It is his prerogative, but it does raise some questions, which brings me to the third one that I have, and that is, did any ongoing investigations or potential investigations that Preet was looking at lead to this decision?
Well, that's definitely one of the questions that is out there. You look at the Southern District of New York, it has produced Rudy Giuliani, James Comey. It's quite possible that he's using this opportunity, as was suggested in the intro, to sort of boost his own political profile, which he certainly seems to have succeeded in doing, Mark.
He certainly has. I mean, this is launching his next campaign, whether it's for mayor or governor, whatever it is. But the idea that this is somehow affecting ongoing investigations is wrong. Because what happens is when the U.S. attorney, in every other administration, when the U.S. attorney steps down, career prosecutors pick up the investigations and take them on. So there's zero impact on any investigations. But I think what's happening here, quite frankly, is I think Donald Trump should be doing more of this. There's an entire federal bureaucracy and a bunch of Obama appointees in all these positions because the Senate hasn't confirmed people. They've got all these holdovers of people burrowing in who are undermining his agenda. He needs people in these positions who are loyal to him and who want to carry out his mission.
Some of the lingerers. Thanks, you guys. We got to go. Great to see you both.
Thanks, Martha. Thanks, you too.
So coming up next, our exclusive interview with the fiancée of Sandra Duran, the woman who was struck and killed by a 5-time deported illegal immigrant who was driving drunk. Plus, a new documentary has set off a firestorm of controversy. We are back into this discussion
tonight, only on Fox News Channel.
Developing tonight, a new documentary featuring previously unseen surveillance footage has raised some questions about the hours leading up to the 2014 shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, which touched off so many events in the country. The documentary is called Stranger Fruit, and it suggests Brown's appearance at Ferguson Market and Liquor was about an exchange of pot and cigarillos, and it was not a robbery. Watch.
In the early hours of August 9th, just 11 hours before Mike took his last steps, he went to his local convenience store to make an exchange. Look carefully at the counter and you can see a trade is made. Mike gives the store a little bag of weed. You can see the employees smelling it and passing it around. Then you can clearly see Mike being given 2 big boxes of cigarillos. The store clerk puts the cigarillos into a bag for Mike with his other stuff and hands it over the counter. Mike is about to leave the store, but decides to have the clerk hold his things behind the counter for him. The next day, with his hands politely behind his back, Mike goes back into the store to get his stuff.
So now both the convenience store and the St. Louis prosecutor's office are disputing that footage, and they're accusing the filmmaker of editing the video to fit a narrative. In moments, we're going to hear from both sides, filmmaker Jason Pollock and St. Louis County prosecutor Bob McCullough. But first, Trace Gallagher in our West Coast newsroom with the newly unedited footage that was released just hours ago. Trace.
Hey, Martha, let me just go back and start with that documentary video, which shows Michael Brown visiting that convenience store just after 1 o'clock in the morning, which was several hours before he was accused of robbing the very same store. If you look, you can see Brown grab some drinks and ask for cigarillos. And when the clerk bags the sodas and mini cigars, Michael Brown places something on the counter. The filmmaker, Jason Pollock, says it's marijuana and that Brown is making a trade. And it appears the clerks pick up whatever Brown put down, and they look at it and they smell it. Jason Pollock then goes on to say, here's what really happened. Listen.
Mike traded the store a little bag of weed and got 2 boxes of cigarillos in return. He left his items at the store and he went back the next day to pick them up. Mike did not rob the store.
The St. Louis County prosecutor calls the filmmaker's claim, quote, just stupid and nonsense, saying the poorly edited snippet leaves out critical context. So we went back. We looked at the entire video sequence, and it was edited, and it did leave out context. For example, the filmmaker did not show the clerks talking to Michael Brown, clearly debating whether to make a trade for whatever he put on the counter. And the filmmaker did not show the clerks taking back the sodas and the cigars and putting them back on their shelves. The lawyer for the convenience store says Brown tried to barter, but he failed. Listen to him.
This is the argument that's going on between Michael Brown and the clerks. What do you mean, you won't barter with me? What do you mean I can't trade with you? Why not? Come on, man. The language got heated and it got ugly.
The filmmaker stands by his claim that the footage would have changed the narrative that Michael Brown was shot after robbing a convenience store. Police say it was irrelevant because Officer Darren Wilson didn't stop Michael Brown for robbery. He stopped him for walking in the middle of the street. Martha.
Thank you, Trace. Joining me now, the filmmaker behind Stranger Fruit, Jason Pollock. Jason, good to have you here. Good evening to you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great.
I am simply stunned by that report. Simply stunned.
All right,
Beautiful job.
You
Fake
can be
News
simply stunned,
101.
Hold on. I have a question for you, okay? Because to me, what are you proposing legally? It makes no difference whether a robbery happened or a trade for pot happened or whether a bank got robbed or he was home doing his homework. What matters is what happens in the street when he and Officer Wilson encounter each other. So why have you focused so heavily on what happened in the convenience store?
That's a very interesting way to phrase this, because I completely agree with you. And the reason we put out this convenience store tape now is so that people could get over it, because he didn't rob the store. And anyone that sees the exchange that takes place with a conscience, a heart, 2 minds, and is not a bigot, pretty much understands what happened. Unfortunately, there's some people in America with so much bias inside of them that they just want to think that Michael Brown is a bad guy. But yes, let's talk about the physical evidence on Canfield.
They think perhaps that Michael Brown is a bad guy because 40 FBI agents went to Ferguson to investigate this case at the behest of Eric Holder, who showed up almost immediately after it happened. I think it's fair to assume that they really believed that they were going to be able to indict Officer Wilson, that he had acted wrongly.
No, I don't think that that's, I don't think that that's absolutely not true. Not true. Don't just say that.
No. You're just saying plenty of things. So let me just,
Those
let me
FBI
just throw one
agents?
thing up. The FBI agents went down there. Eric Holder went down there.
To indict Darren Wilson? Darren Wilson? No way. You know how the system works. These cops get off every single time. Bob McCullough has been the prosecutor for over 2 decades. And for 23 years. Excuse me. Let me just finish this. For 23 years, according to the Washington Post, there has not been a prosecution of a single police shooting in St. Louis County.
So you believe, hold
one
on,
of them,
now it's my
every
turn.
single one of them, none of them are indictable?
It's my turn. You're suggesting that 40 FBI agents were all in cahoots
suggesting the Department of Justice failed.
that this person was not indicted. Listen to me.
They failed.
So it's not possible
Stranger
in your
Fruit.
brain that what happened there was what was found by both the grand jury and 40 FBI agents. You're discounting. You're saying all of that doesn't matter. Their investigation is absolutely not true.
When
Michael Brown did not reach into that car to grab his gun.
Excuse me, miss. Can I speak now? When the facts of this case come out in my film, Stranger Fruit, the real facts of this case, the facts of this case that Bob McCullough doesn't want us talking about, like the fact that Michael Brown was shot in the head and a bullet came out of his eye. Do you know how that would happen? When your head is down and there's a bullet in the ground. In their report, there's a bullet in the ground by Michael Brown's head. Now, how would a bullet go through here, out of his eye, and then get stuck in the ground?
What I know is that there were 3 different forensic investigations that were done that showed that he was shot in the front.
They failed him.
Everyone in the country was told this narrative that he was shot in the back. That he had his hands up and said,
"You know
don't
how many
shoot,"
black men are
which
in
was
jail
all
right now?
discounted
You know how
by
many
40
black men are in jail right now for nothing? For nothing? Because the Department of Justice failed them? You know how many black men are in jail right now? Don't tell me because they closed the book on it. We're okay. My film will show the public the truth, ma'am. And if you want to know the truth, you should watch it.
Yeah, okay. I don't know why you got so hung up on what happened, whether he was trading pot or trading or stealing something is completely irrelevant to the outcome of this case. Joining me now to respond to this is Bob McCullough, who you just heard mentioned. He's the St. Louis County prosecuting attorney, and I would imagine that he has a response to a very heated Jason Pollock. Good evening, sir. Good to have you here. What do you think?
Well, good evening. I'm happy to be here. Well, he has his facts wrong, not shockingly. There was no bullet in the ground anywhere near Michael Brown. There are 3 separate medical examiners, including one hired by the Brown family, the Department of Defense, and the St. Louis County medical examiner all came to the same conclusion. He's making up facts as he goes along to push his film. You know, he's an amateur filmmaker, and he's just making things up to do that. You look at the entire. Is it true that no
police officer has ever been prosecuted for shooting an unarmed person in Ferguson, Missouri?
In Ferguson, yes. And in St. Louis County, I think is what you're asking with that. Over the years, there have been several shootings. All have been investigated, and none of them were indicted. Correct.
So he's claiming that there were underhanded tactics, that things were hidden, that the story and the investigation that was done by 40 FBI agents, overseen by the Department of Justice and the grand jury, that they all were in cahoots with you to make sure that Darren Wilson was never indicted.
You know, I mean, that's just, listen to what you just said and tell me how silly that is. And it really is silly that somehow I have this control over the United States Department of Justice, the Attorney General of the United States, the FBI. It's just nonsense. And this guy's trying to push his movie, which is made up, makes up the facts on it. You saw the entire surveillance video from all 4 angles, unedited. And he's trying to strike a deal with them.
Is there any legal relevance to what happened in the, excuse me for interrupting, to what happened in the convenience store?
No,
I mean, it seems to me that the whole question begins in the street when these two, Darren Wilson and Michael Brown, confront each other, correct?
Well, it begins there, but it relates back to the incident at the store at about noon on that day, because that plays into this, and that became relevant to what went on in the street. What happened at 1 o'clock that morning was both logically and legally irrelevant and immaterial, which is why it was never presented to the grand jury. That's not something I'd ever be able to use in a trial had there been any kind of an indictment coming out of this, so it's not going to be presented to the grand jury. It is documented. This isn't new information. It's documented in the police report, the conversation the police had with the employees of the store, The fact that we issued a search warrant so they could get the surveillance video, that they looked at the surveillance video, examined it, documented that, described what's on that video in the police report, all of which was released November 24, 2014. It's all been sitting there, open to the world, open to anybody who wants to look at it, including this fella.
All right, Bob McCullough, thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
So coming up next, the unthinkable tragedy of Sandra Duran, who was killed by a drunk driver on her way home from church with her sister. This man had been deported 5 times from this country. Her fiancé, Rodrigo Macias, saw a segment on this the other night here, and he is joining us now to speak exclusively to us. We will be right back.